Hey guys, it's Kylie Draws here. In today's video, I've stuck to the promise that I made in my last video, and today I'll be doing a mega tutorial. It's more like a bunch of mini tutorials all crammed into one video, but calling it a mega tutorial sounds cooler. Anyways, enough intro, let's get started. Thank you to everyone who commented on the previous video with your questions and suggestions. Mon_W asks, where on earth did I learn to draw such gorgeous eyes? First of all, thank you so much for calling the eyes I draw gorgeous. I can tell that you and I have a similar taste in eyes and how they're drawn, which is why we will be starting off with an eye tutorial. I'll be using this drawing of Kanade I did earlier today to show how I draw eyes. But first of all, we just need to take a few layers away so then we can see her eyes a little better. Nice! So now with Kanade's eyes, she has a more angular shape to them, which in turn makes the eyeliner part here sharper. For rounder eyes like Kylie, for example, the eyeliner part is rounder. Here is how I draw the shape of the two eye shapes. For the rounder eye shape, I start with a sideways C shape like so. It should be flatter on the bottom of the eye. Then I just draw another C to thicken the eye out. It should be thicker on this part because that's where the eyelash thingy is. For girls, I put a small eyelash at the top of the eye here, and for guys, I just leave it as it is. When drawing more angular eyes, I tend to keep my shapes very rectangular and sharp. I start off with a flattish line for the top of the eye. Then I curve down a little for the eyelash. It really depends on the character, but for more angular eyes, I tend to not draw the underside of the eye. Mainly because I found that drawing the underside makes the character look tired or just older. Since most of my characters have very youthful faces, I exclude drawing the underside of the eye. When drawing the irises, just remember that they change shape depending on the perspective and where they are looking. When the eyes are looking forward, they're circles. When it's on a 3/4 angle, the eyes become more oval-like. A good way to practice this is by drawing your own eyes in different perspectives, looking at eye models, and also learning more about how perspective works on sphere-like shapes. Now I'll just hop back to the Kanade drawing, and here I'll show you guys how I color my eyes. Again, everything depends on the eye and how detailed you want it to be, but I'll just show the basics I use when coloring eyes. First of all, I get the base color of the eye. In the reference I have, I usually use the top color of the eye instead of the lighter color on the bottom. This is so that it's easier for me to add highlights and extra details. Because the base color is dark, it's easier to see the details in the eyes by doing it this way. I make a new layer below my eyeliner layer. You see that I have separated the two parts of the eye so that it's easier for you guys to see what I'm doing. The new layer for coloring should go under the line art for the iris. In this case, I named the iris layer Eye. I use the fill tool to put in the base color. Then I make a new layer above that and set it to clipping so I don't draw out of the lines. Using your default brush, in my case the pen brush, I draw a half circle at the top of the iris using a dark color to the eye. You can do the same thing with a large airbrush too. It just depends on what effect you want with the eyes. For example, in this drawing of Miku that I featured briefly in my previous video, you can see that her eyes have a slight gradient to them. This is base color, and this is the darker part I mentioned earlier. The rest of the colors are just to add a bit of extra detail and color to the eye, and they are completely optional and vary from character to character. Take my Hu Tao drawing for example. This is the base color, and and this is the darker part. Now, you may be asking yourself if I've made a mistake here. You're probably saying, but Kylie, this isn't the darker part, this is lighter. And yeah, you're right. When coloring eyes that are dark in color, it's not going to make much of a difference if you use dark on dark, which is why sometimes you gotta switch it up and use a lighter color instead. Back to Kanade, you can see that her eyes seem very dull. But don't worry, we can fix that with a few simple highlights. I usually add the highlights after I finish coloring the iris, and again, it depends on the character, but highlights are completely optional. I personally like adding them because it makes the character seem more lively. Firstly, make a new layer above the iris layer, and use the circle tool to draw in the highlights. You don't have to use the circle tool, and hand drawing in the highlights is also great. I just use the circle tool to save time undoing and redoing highlights. I also want the highlights to be similar in size and shape between each eye. I use an off-white color for the highlights, or I use the same color as the sclera of the eye. That's the white part. When drawing highlights, I like to have the highlight blend in with the white part of the eye so it looks nicer, and also the transition between the eye and the highlight is smoother. When shading the eyes, it usually depends on the light source, but in a white light or in a situation that has very minimal contrast between light sources, I like to color pick the base color of the eye and then use that to draw the shadow. I make a new layer above the coloring layer and set it to clipping and multiply. After drawing in the shadow, I usually bring down the opacity to around 30 to 40%. With shadows, you can convey a lot of emotion with them. For example, a shadow that covers a lot of the eye and is very dark could make the character seem scared or mad. Having less shadow covering the eye makes the appearance seem more lighthearted. And that's how I draw and color eyes. Thank you again to monmon_w for requesting this. For the rest of the tutorials in this video, I'll be answering Chopsticks questions. They asked, how can I practice on drawing facial features similar to how you do on your characters? How can I practice basic posing / basic anatomy? And lastly, any good motivation tips for someone who has art block? These are all great questions, so let's tackle them one by one. Let's start off with how I draw facial features on my characters. I'm going to do an overview kind of tutorial for this one, since I personally think it's very important to study and learn for yourself when it comes to these kinds of things. Especially because a lot of facial features and structure come with the artist's art style and what they find looks and feels good for them. Using this head base, you can see that the top of the eyes is basically in line with the top of the ear. The nose is around the middle of the ear, and the mouth starts at the bottom of the ear. This is true for both the open mouth and closed mouth. With the chin, I usually draw it a little higher when the mouth is closed. This is also more realistic, since your chin moves down a little when you open your mouth, and vice versa. With the eyebrows, they are usually placed a little higher above the eyes. It's a little hard to show with the screen recording, but when I make a C shape with my thumb and index finger, the gap between the two fingers is the exact amount of space between the top of the eye and the bottom of the eyebrow. The shape of the eyebrow is curved relative to the eye. This means that the eyebrow curves to the eye shape. For example, if the eye is round like this base, then the eyebrow is curved more. If the eye is more angular, then the eyebrow is more angular and straighter overall. With different expressions, the gap between the eyebrow and the eye stays the same. Although this is for mild emotions, if a character is super angry, then it's better to show the intensity of that emotion by making the eyebrows super close to the eye. With straighter eyebrows, I like to add a slight curve as the eyebrow tapers off to the side of the face. This is so the character doesn't look too serious. Moving on to the mouth, different mouth shapes and ways I draw teeth. I have two ways of drawing teeth, one with the pointy canines and one without. It really depends on what I'm drawing, but I usually gravitate towards drawing the teeth with the visible canines. This makes the character seem more youthful and upbeat. But again, I switch between the two depending on how I feel about the character's mood and appearance. When drawing the tongue, I like to have a bit of space between the tongue and the teeth, so the mouth doesn't look too full. I usually fill in the blank space with the color I use to do the line art, unless specified. It's mainly for time-saving reasons, and also because I don't need to shade the inside of the mouth as much. For the nose, I usually draw one of 3 nose types. Each one really depends again on the angle, the mood that I'm trying to capture with the art, and if it works with what I'm trying to achieve. The first nose is the round nose. It's just a half-ish circle with a part that sticks out pointing in the direction the character's head is facing. When they are facing head-on, the nose is always pointing to your left. That holds true for each nose type. The second nose is a flat/standard nose. This is your typical anime nose. Since it is very popular in many styles, and I just adopted it into my style, I won't go over this in lots of detail. The third nose is a sharp nose. This is the most defined nose out of the 3, and I usually use this nose when drawing older guys. I also don't really use this nose very often either, as it is a little harder to shade and get right in all perspectives. Finally, all facial features should be between the orange lines which I'm drawing and labeling right now. And that's an overview on how I draw my facial features. Now on to the next question by Chopstick. I'll be doing a tutorial on how to practice posing/basic anatomy. I won't actually be drawing anything from now on until the end of this video because I did have very little time to record this, and if I did end up having, showing how I actually practice drawing anatomy and like doing poses and things, this video would probably be almost half an hour long, and also this video upload would be way more delayed than it already is. So yeah, I'll just be talking over this speed draw of adding highlights and extra details to Miku. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I glossed over how to practice posing/basic anatomy in the beginning of a video that I posted all the way back at the start of 2023. I explained it a little there, but it's not super detailed. If you're still interested in watching that video after this one, or you can subscribe to this channel so you won't miss out on any future updates and more. Alright, let's start. When practicing poses and/or anatomy, Pinterest is your best friend. You can find a bunch of poses and bases to practice drawing with, and there's also plenty of references of singular parts like hands, heads, feet, and so much more. I recommend making a board for full body poses, half body poses, and bust up poses. I've also made a few boards with specific things that I'm not very good at drawing or finding inspiration with, like a board for hands and a board for different expressions. I also find drawing things part by part, especially parts which I'm weaker at drawing, easier than drawing a whole piece to practice. This keeps my motivation up and also helps me be less focused on perfecting everything. With anatomy, you just have to draw things over and over again across a span of a few days or weeks or months. You can always take your time with these things and never rush, because I remember back when I first started drawing, I wanted to draw those super detailed anime scenes, and like I tried and failed and kinda gave up on that, and that's probably why I can't draw backgrounds. Yeah, but I don't really have any tips on how to make practicing anatomy faster, but studying other artists' works is very helpful to get a head start. Oh, and if digital art is your main medium, which for me it is, stepping away and doing some traditional art will really help with making your strokes more confident and consistent. Well, I'm not too sure if it will help everyone, but I found that drawing in my sketchbook helped improve my confidence in line work and helped to develop my art style more, especially drawing in pen or drawing with a pencil and then you forgot to bring your eraser, so basically yeah, drawing in pen and stuff. And it also helped me to not really be so much of a perfectionist when it comes to art, because I find that having to redo and then undo and then redo things over and over again really brings down my motivation for actually finishing an art piece. And yeah, that's it for practicing posing and anatomy. The main takeaway from it is to gather a bunch of references and then do lots of repetition on places that you're less confident drawing. Now for the final tutorial in this video, I'll be sharing some tips that'll help you get out of art block. As someone who has once been in art block for over a month, I've tried a bunch of things to get motivation back. I found that collecting pictures and color palettes from all sorts of sources and places really helps with sparking inspiration. I've got Pinterest boards for color palettes too, and it usually gives me motivation into drawing. Doodling randomly helps too, on random pieces of paper, on different materials, and maybe in class, but only draw in class after you've finished all your work. I don't want to catch any of you slacking off. Oh, and different mediums of art really get the creative flow going. I personally really rely on painting things as a way of getting motivation, and I find it really fun and relaxing. Speaking of that, what's your favorite art medium? Leave your answer down in the comments. I'm curious to see what you all enjoy doing art with. Back to more tips. Listening to set playlists or songs that have stories and strong emotions behind them help me. Since I'm a very visual learner, I find music helps with ideas and mood of art, if that makes sense. I've got different playlists that give different types of motivation. For example, when I'm experiencing art block, a nice and upbeat J-pop playlist gives me a bunch of ideas. Or if I want to draw something super detailed and I know I'll get unmotivated easily, some Genshin Impact OST really helps set a calm and comfortable tone to my art space. Just experiment with different things and see what works. And remember, don't lose hope, you get over art block soon. Take breaks, go outside, and don't overwork yourself. Health comes first. And that's all for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed this mega tutorial and learned something from it. I do want to say sorry for the super late upload. I've got exams coming up this week and I've been busy studying for them, so video uploads will be slower than usual. Don't worry though, I'll keep you all updated on the community tab on the channel. That's all for today. Until then, bye!